So good morning, friends. I'm Tina Owen-Moore, and I'm here to talk to you today a little bit about life expectancy and how Japan may have just figured out the fountain of youth. So let's start with the story of self. This is me right here when I was about 5 years old. And in just a couple of weeks from now, I am about to do something remarkable. And that's that I'm going to turn 45 years old. Now, I know for many of you out there, you're thinking that's not so remarkable, but just 100 years ago, the life expectancy for someone in the United States was only 45 years old. That's right, just 100 years before I was born, it was likely that this might be as long as I would ever live. But that's changed a great deal in the past century. One of the other things to note, though, is that the U.S. was far ahead of most countries in 1890 in terms of life expectancy. And in the past few years, that's begun to change. In 1965, the life expectancy in the U.S. was 70 years old, but that was also the time when Japan caught up with the United States in terms of life expectancy. And in the most recent studies in 2015, life expectancy in Japan far outreached the United States. So what happened? I dug into some of the factors. What are we doing differently? What are they doing differently to see if I could figure out the fountain of youth? Was it alcohol consumption? I looked, and the data actually showed that in Japan, they drink more alcohol than us. I was a little grateful for that one. Was it smoking? No, it turns out that they also out-consume us in terms of smoking. And I looked at blood pressure. Unfortunately, there's a tie to smoking and blood pressure, and people in Japan tend to have higher blood pressure than those in the US. So if it wasn't these three things, what was it? Well, there were three factors that really came out in the differences between Japan and the US. Body mass index was one of them. Body mass index in the United States is much higher than in Japan. Calories consumed per day. It turns out that we consume almost twice as many calories as people in Japan on a daily basis. And finally, sugar per person. This one was surprising to me, but it's amazing how much more sugar that we eat in the US. The other thing that I noted is that life expectancy stalled as sugar consumption went up. And as sugar consumption began to drop in Japan, they started to see longer life expectancies. So, with that in mind, I dug into what does this look like for the average person. So, I have a little bit of examples here. For the average man, the USDA recommends. For the average woman, the USDA recommends 25 grams of sugar per day. So that's about this much, the amount of sugar in 6 marshmallows. And for men, the USDA recommends 37.5 grams of sugar per day, which is about 9 marshmallows. But what are we actually consuming in terms of sugar? Well, in Japan, it's 80 grams of sugar per day that people are consuming. And this has had a slight drop, and that's when the life expectancies have actually increased, something to think about. And in the US, how much sugar do we consume per day? Well, it wouldn't even fit on the plates. We actually consume about 200 grams of sugar, much more sugar than in Japan, and especially much more than the recommendations by the USDA. So what does this tell us? That the secret to a long life, to longevity, may just be what's in your refrigerator. Life expectancy is connected to BMI, to calories per day, and to sugar intake. So watch what you're eating, think about your sugar, and maybe we can turn those numbers around. Thank you.